Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us for our artificial lures fishing tips for trout here in Oklahoma. So, today, what we're going to kind of be going through is the five different artificial lures that you could use here in Oklahoma for trout and really anywhere and find success. This is very basic equipment. There's lots of different things that you could potentially use to catch trout, but when it comes down to it, we're really looking at five categories. We're looking at our inline spinners, our super dupers, our spoons, our slabs, and then our soft plastic baits. So this course, we're just going to go through what the each one of these lures has to offer, how you fish them, where you might look to use them, and kind of the expectations that you might have for success. At any point during the course, if you have any questions, moving too fast, you want to see something again, just throw it into the chat bar and we'll address stuff as we go. So, with that, your basic setup that you're going to need for trout fishing with lures in Oklahoma's trout fisheries is a anywhere from a light action rod up to a medium action rod. So, um, your light action equipment is more than likely going to be paired with some type of spinning reel. As you get into medium light, medium action, you could have a spin casting reel, a bait casting reel, open face spinning reel. It's really just kind of up to the angler what their preference is. Uh, Test line that you're looking for, monofilament or fluorocarbon line, somewhere in between 2 and 10 pounds. If you're using a basic kind of out of the box combo set that you bought, more than likely it's already spooled with 10-pound test. Um, but really what you're looking for, a good happy medium is like a 6-pound test. But fluorocarbon or monofilament, not a need for braid when you're trout fishing. First off, it's visible. You're usually fishing clearer water for trout. So unless you're willing to tie on a leader, like a fluorocarbon to braid leader with that, you could do that. It's just kind of overkill. It's not really necessary. So just something in between, 2 and 10 pounds, but probably more like a 4, 6, or 8 pound monofilament or fluorocarbon test, paired with something between a 5 foot and 7 foot light action to medium action rod. Just kind of depends on what your preference is. Your lighter action rods, you're going to be able to throw some of the lighter artificial baits a little bit easier, especially with like 2 or 4, even 6-pound test. You're going to create less bird's nests and kind of some of the hangups that come along with throwing the lighter tackle. If you're using a heavy rod and a medium heavy rod and 10-pound test and you're trying to throw a 1/16 ounce lure, more than likely you're going to end up with some tangles and just things. So we're going to try to get you paired into what you can use to really have the most amount of success if you're going to target trout with using artificial equipment for your tackle. So with that, I'm just going to kind of go through each lure, how you'd fish it, where you might look to find success with it. All of these are very straightforward. You're going to tie every single one of these lures directly onto the end of your main line. You don't need a snap swivel or any other type of attachment. You're going to tie your line directly on to the eyelids of these lures and use them. So I'm going to start with our inline spinner group. An inline spinner is essentially a fixed piece of metal with a blade on it, and the blade rotates around the fixed piece of metal. They usually have tails on them, some type of feather, synthetic, or hair tail. So the colors schemes that you're going to find for inline spinners, if you go to any type of retailer or you look online, I mean, there's going to be dozens of different color schemes. The two most productive colors that you're going to find anywhere where you go trout fishing in Oklahoma are going to be an olive or a brown color, which are going to be these two right here. These are Warden's Rooster Tails, Yakima Bait Company. You're going to find these in lots and lots of different places. This green one right here is called frog or hammered copper frog, just depending on what the blade is. But usually the color that is on the packaging, or at least on the label of where it hangs on the shelf, is going to say frog, and this one is going to say grasshopper. I go back and forth between which one I think is more effective. I've gone over the years thinking this one's better or this one's better, but these two colors right here, if you have these in your box and you like using inline spinners to fish for trout, either of these two are going to be your winners. You're looking at any of the artificial lures that you're going to throw in Oklahoma, in any of these water bodies, just because of depth and all of that. You're looking at you could go down to a 1/32. A lot of these different lures, they don't make them that small. You might find a specialty brand that'll make a 1/32. But usually your two standard sizes, you're looking at a 1/16 ounce and a 1/8 ounce. You don't really need to get heavier than a 1/8 ounce. A 1/6 in a rooster tail or a 1/4 ounce, you're going to start getting too far down in the water column. You're going to start finding snags and hangups and all that stuff. So with these rooster tails and any of the lures that I'm going to show today, you're really, when you go to buy them, when you're trout fishing, you're looking at a 1/16 ounce or a 1/8 ounce. Either one is fine. A 1/8 ounce, you're probably going to be retrieving it a little bit quicker. It's going to be heavier. It's going to reach the bottom. So it's going to be a quicker retrieve speed. A 1/16 ounce allows you to kind of play with the depth column a little bit more. Because you can allow it to fall, it's lighter, so you can let it get deeper and then slow roll it in, or you can keep it higher up in the water column by retrieving a little bit faster. So if you feel comfortable throwing the smaller baits, I'm always an advocate of the lighter and smaller a bait profile that you can throw, where you're not dealing with getting twists in your line, because the equipment that you have isn't meant to throw baits that are that light. You're always going to find more success the smaller and lighter you can go. You can just catch more fish, just based on sheer numbers. Most of the fish that get stocked are going to be 8 to 14 inches. They're more well adept at taking a smaller lure than a fish that's 20 inches. But those are fewer and far between. But 16th ounce, 8th ounce, that's what you need to remember to take away from this course, is that's really the size profile that you're looking for your lures. But the green, the olive, those are going to be your two just bread and butter. You can't really outfish those ones. Some other pretty standard colors are going to be natural colors like a white or a black. Just any type of inline spinner that's got, I prefer gold flashers. They come in gold or silver, nickel, some just different tones, but I really prefer gold for my flasher. I think with trout fishing, gold over silver, I find more bites, I catch more fish more often. And here's another kind of black one with some yellow. But those are going to be your natural colors. Now, trout will occasionally, they'll go after those flashier colors. If you want to throw something that is a little bit brighter, more of an attractant, you might look at throwing like a chartreuse or an orange. Again, I have, kind of a gold or a bronze plate for my blade as opposed to a silver blade. But most colors and most manufacturers of inline spinners are going to have some combination of an orange, a chartreuse, a white, a black, a green, and a brown, with either gold, bronze, or silver flashers. And it's really just up to you to feel what you feel confident in. Now with inline spinners, so all the ones that I just showed were 1/8 ounce. So just for a size profile perspective, this is a 1/8 ounce. This is a 1/16 ounce. So a little bit smaller body. Blades are about the same size. And then a 1/24 ounce of the same. So we just have just a little bit smaller body profiles, but the bait overall, the treble hooks are going to be different sizes on each. This one is going to be more of like a size 10 treble, and we're going to move into like a size 12 treble with the 16th ounce. and like a size 14 treble on our 122nd ounce. But all in all, the overall size profile of the bait between the 124th and the 1/8, not a huge difference. So it's really just about if you're fishing in current, water speed, and then depth. If you need to, size up to a 1/8 to get lower in. The one thing that I do recommend with any of these baits or lures that we're going to show today, um, instead of sizing up your lure size by weight or by profile, if you're not getting to the depth that you need to achieve, use a piece of split shot, crimp it to your line 8 inches above where your knot is on the lure. So we were tied onto our main line. We'd crimp this on about right here. Allow this to drag it down. You can always pick up your speed, but if you get heavier and heavier with your bait and your size profile, you're going to start seeing less bites. So if you can get a smaller bait down into the strike zone, always use a piece of split shot instead of sizing up your lure, and you're just going to find more bites doing that. Fishing these in still water. So if you're fishing a lake, a pond, one of the seasonal trout fisheries like a Medicine Creek or a Robber's Cave, that is a creek or a river, but the water's not really moving, you can cast these in any direction. So you can run them parallel with the bank, you can cast them cross current, upstream, whatever, because there's not really current to affect it. So you're just looking for a slow, steady retrieve. If you're fishing in a lake, where you might want to be getting down to, like, you're casting out to 12 feet of water and you want to get your bait down, to 6, 8 feet, you just need to let it fall when it hits the water. You probably elect for a 1/8 ounce. And all you're doing with inline spinners is casting them out and straight retrieving them in. It's just a steady retrieve. All you're trying to do is get the blade of this to rotate around. Now, what can happen, it typically doesn't happen in still water unless something has happened, like the line has got wrapped around the hook point or the line's got wrapped around the body somehow. What you can do when you cast out with your rod, once you lock your bail and you go to reel, you can always give just a little hook set to get it going, to get that blade spinning. Because what happens is, as it's falling, if the line gets wrapped in any way, you're going to feel that you're not getting a pulse. So when you're reeling in an inline spinner, that blade that's rotating around is going to provide kind of a steady vibration to the rod tip. So when you're reeling it in, the tip of your rod, what you should be feeling in your hand on the rod deck as you're reeling in, you should be feeling just a steady vibration. That means that blade is spinning. If it's slack or you're not feeling that vibration, it's more than likely the blade is not rotating or your line is wrapped around the hook, in which point you just have to reel that in and get it out. But what can happen is when you cast an inline spinner into current, especially upstream of current, it's moving at the same speed as the water. It's not allowing that blade to catch the resistance of the water to spin. So what you can do is when it hits the water and you go to engage your reel, you can actually just kind of give a quick little hook set. So you just snap your wrist as you cast it out, and as you're going to give it a quick little deal as you start to reel. And that's going to get that blade spinning and you'll feel it. And that can be helpful, especially when you're fishing rooster tails, inline spinners in moving water. But those are your basic colors. Like I said, they make dozens of them, and it really kind of is, up to you what you want to choose. But if you take away anything, something that is in this grasshopper or this frog color, gold blades, 1/8 of an ounce, 1/16 of an ounce, you can use those anywhere you go in Oklahoma, go fishing. You're going to find a lot of trout using those for inline spinners, and they're great, super easy to use. The only time they get a little bit tricky is when you're using them in heavier current for either getting them down to where you need them in depth, or you're casting too far upstream. You really kind of have to fish them kind of just a little bit cross current upstream and have them swing down. That way they're able to sink down, middle of the water column, come right in you, keep a good strike zone the entire retrieve. You get too far downstream, casting downstream, that current with the weight of your lure and your retrieve speed is going to force that lure up to the surface, and that's not going to be effective. And vice versa, you cast it straight upstream, that current is moving faster, the same speed as your retrieve. It's forcing that lure down into the water column, and it's not getting the blade to spin as intended. So that's the big thing with inline spinners. So the next one that we have is going to be our super dupers. Now, super dupers are arguably the most lethal artificial trout lure that you're going to have in Oklahoma, pretty much anywhere that you fish. They come in a few different colors and a few different sizes, just like your rooster tails. So they're just a shaved piece of metal. So this is what a super duper looks like. It's just a shaved piece of metal that comes down with a half swivel on it. So you attach your line to the half swivel as opposed to a inline spinner, which that eye hole goes all the way down to the hook. So that little shank that goes all the way down, it's fixed. Whereas with the super duper, it's a half swivel, which means that shaved piece of metal is free on that half swivel, which gives a ton of erratic action. They come out of a package looking just like this, but you can bend them inward to make the wobble tighter, where when you just cast this out and retrieve it in, it's flashing like this as that water is passing through that opening, and it just makes it wobble. And because it's on a half swivel, it's completely loose. So it's kind of given an erratic twisting and turning and flashing like a dying, injured bait fish that stimulates fish, predatory fish, to bite. You can also make it on a slower and more erratic, wider wobble by opening that a little bit. You can pull it open. That means more water is passing through it. So it's going to be much more of kind of a rolling wobble. But with these, Oklahoma, take them straight out of the box. They look just like that. Tie them on, cast it out, retrieve it straight in. With these, the great thing is no blade, right? So you can cast these upstream and still get the effect of a wobble and reel it in. The only thing is it can dive down, you can get hung up and snagged. But these you can basically cast in any direction you want, and you're going to get effectiveness out of that lure. Now, like I said earlier, I'm partial to gold. And with these super dupers, I'm especially partial to the ones that have this little plating on it that's called Prism Light. And it's essentially just a piece of like metallic tape that they have on there that just gives it that real, when it's hitting the light like that and flashy. You can fish this on a sunny day, a cloudy day. You're going to get a lot of not only action, but a lot of good flash that comes off of this in any situation. So this is my go-to. Now they make 3-4 different sizes that you can find, and they're labeled as 500, 501, 502, 503. 503, which is what this is going to be the biggest model. A 500 is going to be the smallest model, and it's going to be like this. This is going to be about the equivalent of an 1/8 ounce lure, a 1/8, maybe a 1/6. Your 500 is going to be the equivalent of a 1/32. And then your 501 and your 502 are going to be your 1/32 to 1/8, which the 501 favoring more like a 1/16 and the 502 favoring more closer to like a 1/8. But either one of these, I prefer the 501. I like super light action, light, small baits anytime that I'm trout fishing. So I'll elect for the 501. But I'm also throwing it on a light action rod, 2 or 4 pound test, so I can zing it pretty good without having bird's nests and things like that. If you're just starting out, if you're using 8-10 pound test, you're probably going to want to elect for using the 502 or the 503. It's a little bit heavier, and you don't have to retrieve it as slowly. So you can just cast it out, rip it right in. You're going to get good action on it. They also make them, well, so before I move on to the other colors, I'll show what one looks like that's gotten eaten a bunch. So these are both the 500. It's a little bit hard to see in the webcam with the glare. This is a brand new one. So this is what that tape looks like when it comes right out of the packaging. This is what one looks like when it's been had dozens of fish tear through it. Starts to kind of wash that metallic-y tape, but it still gives it, in my opinion, a better flash than a straight gold one. So this is a gold 500, same exact lure. This one doesn't have the tape on it. It's just gold. And when you kind of move them, you can see how they hit the light. This one gives a lot brighter flash off of it. So with those, I always favor the gold prism light. That's my favorite one, 501. That's my #1 trout lure in Oklahoma. Use that in any river. If I'm in still water, pond or a lake, I'll use them occasionally, rooster tails, but I'm more than likely, if I'm fishing still water, I'm probably fishing with like power bait off the bottom. It's just more effective than lures because trout aren't natural to Oklahoma. They're stocked. You're just more effective in still water with bait. So that's typically if I'm going to do it. But if I am going to go to, one of the smaller bodies of water, a Perry, one of the urban trout fisheries like Edwards Park, Route 66, Veterans Park and Jinx, then I'm going to go with one of the super dupers over the rooster tail or some of these other lures that we have. Some other common colors that you can find in the super dupers, going to be like a chartreuse with some orange in it. So a lot like the flashier, the rooster tails that I showed. This is going to be your flashy super duper. And then just a good rainbow trout. This is pretty effective right here. If I was going to take a secondary color for spoons or for slabs or for super dupers, it's going to be something that's in this color. They just tend to have a lot of success, more so than going with a silver. So here's a silver with that prism light tape on it. And then here's one that's just straight silver. And again, 500s, 501s, 502s, 503s. I prefer 501s. But if you're using 8-10 pound test, if you're using a medium action rod, you're probably going to want to elect for like the 502 or the 503. It's going to cast a lot better. It's going to be easier to retrieve. When you're fishing those, if you're on a lake, pond, cast them parallel with the shoreline, fan cast, just cast them everywhere. And then it's just a slow, steady retrieve in. And like I said, you can move the blade on the back. You can bend this back piece. You can either push it in for a tighter wobble, or you can pull it out for a slower, wider wobble. Or you can leave it just how it comes out of the package, which is usually plenty enough. And you're just going to steady retrieve. Pretty much with all these lures, you're not jigging them. You're not burning them. You're not really slow rolling them. It's just cast them out, just a steady retrieve. Just, nice and easy as you go. And the trout will start to give it away, whether or not you're going too fast or too slow. But they are wintertime fish. So this is kind of their active season, unlike our warm water species, our bass, our panfish, our catfish that really slow down their reaction and their ability to go chase something. Trout are in the prime in that, 40, 50 degree water temp. So you don't have to go super slow. You can steady retrieve, even a fast retrieve. They're going to be able to come catch it because they're comfortable in that water. So the next set of lures that we have are going to be our spoons. And what a spoon is another piece of metal that is concave on one side. So it's a solid piece. And it's usually bent, and it's kind of like a spoon. If you were to turn it upside down, it's concave on this side. These have an eye hole that is loose from the lure, so you're not fixated straight to the lure. Really, the only one you are with that is the rooster tail. And the rooster tail, because you want to get the blade spinning, you don't want to have a swivel on it. You don't want to be loose. You want to have direct connection from the rod tip to the eye hole on that to make this work efficiently and effectively. With any of these super dupers, spoons, slabs, you could put a snap swivel on. It's not necessary because they are already hanging off of their eye. So they have kind of free range of movement. And what this is going to do in the water is it's just going to catch, the water is going to catch the concave part as it comes in, and it's just going to wobble. Now, for trout, you cast them straight out, retrieve them straight in, they wobble, you get strikes. If you were using spoons for like temperate bass, you might be vertically fishing them where you are jigging them. You allow them to fall straight down below a dock or a boat, and then you would jig them up, and then they would erratically flutter as they fell on a slack line back down. And they'd be doing this and making flashes, and the fish are going to strike as it's falling because it looks like a dead fish. With trout, that's not necessary. You could jig a spoon, you could jig a slab through a river or through a lake, but you're going to find just as much success without any of the headaches of trying to jig and getting line wrapped and all the things that come with just non-steady straight retrieve fishing. You just tie straight on and cast it out. Just like with all of these, if you're fishing on a river, if you're fishing the lower Mountain Fork, lower Illinois, Blue River, where there's some current moving through, you're looking to cast anywhere from straight cross current to about 45 degrees upstream. You're trying to catch that bait midway back to you. It should be even with you in the current. If it's ever getting downstream of you, it should be in like the last 15 feet, maybe. If it's too far away from you and too far downstream, it's just going to rise your bait up into the film, and you're unlikely to get strikes just because that is an unnatural presentation for even bait fish to be up high like that, coming across and upstream. You want to fish these like wounded bait fish that are trying to dart their way in between rocks and things like that, use the current to their advantage, or it looks like a dead bait that's, fluttering downstream. So with all of these lures, if you're fishing them on still water, then you can cast straight out. You can cast them in any direction, work them back with the steady retrieve. But if you're on rivers with current, you're going to be looking to cast them anywhere from cross current, depending on how heavy and what the speed is, to about 45 degrees upstream. You don't want to cast them straight upstream because it's just going to be too hard to catch up, and it's going to dive down, and then you're coming over things. You're going to bury those treble hooks into the back of structure, weeds, sticks, boulders. You're going to lose your lures. But if you're at 45 degrees, you're going to be perfectly middle of the strike zone, and that's where you're going to get your most bites. Do you ever use a swivel for rooster tails to prevent line twists? No. They're on these, if you're using, 4 or 6 pound tests, you shouldn't be having twists in your line. These are meant to pull straight in, and it shouldn't be rotating. The only thing rotating is the blade, and the blade is loose on here. That is turning, but the fixed shank doesn't move. So if you have a swivel on there, I would think you would get more twists because it would be allowing not only for the blade to spin, but the eye hole right there, that doesn't move. So putting a swivel on that is probably not going to allow for your blade to rotate, especially in current. But I mean, you can use a swivel if you want, but you're going to lose effectiveness, and you're probably going to end up with more things. If your line is twisting, there's probably something wrong with your line. You can get your line greased and things where, if it gets wrapped around a fish, it gets slimy. It tries to tangle up. It also could be the way you put it on your spool. It could have bad memory in it where it twists. But with rooster tails, putting a swivel on, especially a rotating swivel, is not going to help um, clear up line twist on that. If anything, it's going to make that blade not work as effectively as it should. So some other colors, and with all of these metal baits and even our rooster tails, you're gonna see very similar color schemes. So like I said, I like gold when it comes to trout, but you're gonna find, so this is like a gold with a burgundy red. This is a silver with an orange. They also make a gold with an orange. Those are two dynamite ones in addition to just the gold. And then you're gonna find ones that are gonna have that trout pattern on it, as well as you're going to find a lot of silver that has more of a kind of a metallic blue mixed in. Again, we're looking for 1/16 ounce or 1/8 ounce. Um, you're going to tie your main line directly on to your eye guide. You're going to cast them out 45 degrees upstream if you're in current, retrieving them steady back to you, looking for those strikes as they begin to swing through seams behind boulders. You're always looking to kind of pitch around your structure, the main river channel. When you're on lakes, you could be casting them straight down the shoreline. Sometimes those trout will get up really shallow in less than a foot of water. Other times they might be kind of out towards where the ledges drop off. But with all these lures, they're just nice, easy, cast straight out, steady retrieve in. So you can make lots and lots and lots of casts to up your success rates. The next group of metal baits is going to be our slabs. So a slab with trout. This is a Castmaster. That's the brand. It's just a shaved piece of metal. So on the back side, it's completely flat. And on the front side, it's just kind of tapered from thin to thick. So it's just a shaved piece of metal. What this is going to do is this is going to be a much tighter and quicker wobble than what we get with the spoon that's concave. So where this is going to be more of a flutter, this is going to be a real tight wobble as you're retrieving it straight across. These are great for rivers and lakes. They're a little bit heavier. They sink real well. You're going to get kind of that flutter as they come down. But all these lures are super simple when it comes to just straight retrieve. Like I said, with the spoons, with these, you can jig them. You can cast them out, let them flutter down, and pop them up off the bottom and let them fall, and pop them back off the bottom and let them fall. But it's really unnecessary, especially with the trout fishing here. You just want to tie straight onto these, but this is what it's going to look like. Now, the generic brands, ones that are made by maybe like a big box retailer like a Bass Pro, they're going to probably be a little bit different shape. So we got the same exact thing here, shaved piece of metal, but this one is more kind of long and slender, and this one's a little bit shorter and a little bit wider. All that's doing is affecting the wobble profile. So, you know, you're putting off a sonic signature of bait fish, and it's just in heavily pressured water. Can a difference be made between these two? Probably. But in Oklahoma seasonal trout fisheries, either one's going to be fine. I like the Castmasters because they're a little bit heavier as a whole. And I just like the shorter, compact bait profile as opposed to the more elongated one. Castmasters are going to come in a few different colors. They're going to be a lot like your spoons. You're going to see basic golds, basic silvers. Some of them are going to have tails with them. Tails are always great. Just something else back there that's giving you a little extra flash. And then you're going to see your kind of nickels and your trout patterns again. And then the silver with the blue. Those are always going to kind of be the tried and true 4 or 5 color schemes that you're going to see on most of these metal bait profiles. I'm partial to gold. I'm partial to like a 1/16 ounce. And that's where I find the most success at all of our trout fishing waters in the state. But every single one of these lures that I've shown, if you throw them enough times, you're going to find success. I just think that the gold profile, it picks up more bites more often than not. But there are always days where throwing the chartreuse or the orange, you might just be hitting so many fish in a row that, you might think that I don't need to throw anything else. And that's good. You want to build confidence with, any of these baits. But the great thing about trout fishing with these, hard baits is that anytime you go, just a little small pocket tackle box. I like the double-sided ones because you get twice the space and, not really much more of the bulk than you would of just a single-sided one, something that's maybe a little bit bigger profiled like this. But these little double-sided planos, I really like these because that'll fit right into a jacket pocket or a hoodie pocket or your waders or anything. And you can literally put everything you need to trout fish that's just like right in that. So the last little bit of artificials that you may or may not use, but are always a good option, are going to be your soft plastics. So these are not as common. What I just showed, your rooster tail or your inline spinner. Rooster tail is a brand name, but that's what it's a vernacular, like Kleenex versus tissue. That's most people call an inline spinner a rooster tail. Slabs, spoons, and super dupers. If you were to come away with one thing from here from me as far as what I think for success for trout in Oklahoma, it's going to be right here. It's going to be this grasshopper, inline spinner, and then the gold prism light super duper. These would be my two. If I could only take two lures to go anywhere, it's always going to be these for trout. My close third is probably going to be the frog colored rooster tail. This one right here with the gold flasher. This will be my third. And then, maybe probably the trout super duper would be number 4 on my list. But really, so many of these baits are so similar that it's really just a matter of how you're casting and retrieving them. But they all kind of act in the same similar manner. With just really the big difference is, it's creating a different wobble profile in the water. All of these baits are, but really what it comes down to is what are you as the angler? What do you find the confidence in? What do you like the feel of the most? They're all going to have a little bit different profile when you retrieve them. The super dupers, when you're retrieving them, especially coming down current or in still water, they feel weird at first if you've never used them because they really don't have any tension. So there isn't a wobble. It feels like there's a lot of slack that's in your line as you're retrieving them. So you're not sure if it's working the way it's supposed to. And then all of a sudden it gets hit really hard and, fish on. And it takes a few times of doing that to build confidence in that bait. Whereas a rooster tail, you're going to feel that steady pulse at the end of the rod tip as you're reeling in. It's going to give steady, constant pressure as that blade is spinning. So you're going to get, real good at noticing the difference between a quick strike from a fish, a hammered strike from a fish, or maybe just kind of touching something like you hit a stick or you hit a rock or you caught the bottom. You're going to start to pick up those differences in the feel from your rod tip. Same thing goes with the spoons and the Castmasters. They're all essentially doing the same thing in a very similar profile, but how you feel it through your rod in your retrieving is really the main difference. And so it's just kind of about building confidence with one or two of these lures. And then, that's really all you need. Because like I said, if you could go all over the state and just use one of these or just use a gold super duper, and that was all you had was just one of those, you're going to catch fish. You're going to throw that, you're going to catch fish. All this other stuff, the bright stuff, that's just maybe you get into a spot that's overpressured. You're not finding success for whatever reason, and you switch it up. But one of those golds or base level colors is really what you're going to find the most success with, like right off the bat, over and over again. So the soft plastics, there's a couple that are geared for trout. You're going to find them at a big box store. or at specialty areas, like if you're going to fish somewhere with the trout area nearby, odds are the local bait and tackle store has some more trout stuff than a Walmart would in the area. And in those cases, you're going to see things that are called like trout magnets or trout worms. So trout magnets are these little tiny soft plastic, just twin tail, that sit on like a 1/200th ounce jig head. They sell them up to like a 1/64th ounce jig head, um, like this one with a bigger profile. But that's still only 1/64th ounce, so that's still really really light. And even the bait profile on it is still only barely an inch and a half. And these little trout magnet ones like this, they're running barely an inch. But these are great because, especially these green ones, so like an olive or a chartreuse one, these mimic inchworms, which are found all over the world, which is kind of like if you're having a really bad day on the water, especially one of the rivers, you just can't seem to find fish with a rooster tail or any of the shaved metal baits. Um, Throwing, like a dropper on where you have maybe a couple of the different colors attached like this, and you would attach this to your main line and throw it beneath a little ball float, either a traditional one. I like to use fly fishing floats, even on my spinning equipment, because you just double the line over. Uh, just doesn't damage the line as much. You start using ones that have clips and crimps on them, they're going to damage your line pretty badly when you remove it. So usually you have to cut your line up above where you had that bobber at because you compromised your line integrity. But by doubling over your line for something like this, these little bobbers, they're great. You can slide them up and down your line, and they're super easy to put on. They have a small side and then the bigger side. And all you do is you just double your line over where you want that bobber on, and then you just slide it through. Um, slide it through to where you get your loop and it comes out, and then you just put that loop and the bobber through the loop and then pull it tight, and then it crimps down on the other side. So it holds on your line like this. And if you were to go to like Blue River, Lower Mountain Fork, Lower Illinois, and then you had this above, probably a foot or two above where you have the first one tied on and the dropper, and float those through seams, you're essentially fly fishing. You're nymphing, but you're nymphing with non-fly fishing equipment using soft plastics. I will actually throw these on a fly rod sometimes just because they're super effective. So instead of using like a green weenie fly, you can just use these little soft plastics, but they float great below a float. You could even throw them below a float in still water if you're on a pond or a lake. Not going to be as effective, but they certainly have their play in the river systems of having something like this that you can float below a bobber. And basically, what you're doing with that is you're just going to cast straight upstream, and then just pick your slack up. So instead of with a fly line where you're mending your floating line upstream, or you're stripping in to make sure that you're keeping tight to where your bobber's at, so that you don't have big downriver bows to where it makes the um, your bait, your lure, your fly, whatever. So it's floating naturally with the current instead of moving faster than the current, where fish, they recognize that something's off because the bait is moving too fast when it's floating in the current. Um, you can just dead stick it sometimes. You cast it out. You can just hold your rod tip out over where it's floating through. But those are a good one. And then they make like trout worms, and I like to use the jig heads from the little trout magnets on these, and you could double these up as well. Um, you could attach, you know, a little to these and have these float with the worm. You could put a salmon egg attached to this, but floating these below a bobber in moving water, you're going to find some success. You could also float a tube below a bobber, or you could just straight cast and retrieve a tube. So chartreuses, reds, olive with some chartreuse. These are going to be pretty like good tried and true trout colors, or something more natural that's like a green pumpkin, red and black flake. 1/64 ounce or 1/32 ounce, like squirt head, uh, jig head, something where you have lead on the shank. You don't want a ball jig head because when you put them up in there, um, the shank is completely exposed inside of the tube. So what ends up happening is that when fish go and bite it, they can pinch the soft plastic all the way down to a blank shank, which allows to rip and tear. So you um, go through them faster. But if you have a jig head that has the full body profile on it, I'll take this one out to show. They're going to look something like this, where that lead comes down on the shank. And this is a 1/64 ounce, the 1/32 ounce. That lead is going to go, almost down to the curve. So you get a lot of good body. So when that's inside of this hollow tube, when those fish go to bite it, it goes up against that lead and it doesn't allow them to rip and tear the body of the bait as easily. But tubes can be effective as well. The one thing to keep in mind that while they are artificial, they are soft plastics. It's not something that you would consider bait. But if you were to fish at the Blue River in the catch and release zone or the lower Illinois in the restricted trout area, these are not considered artificial. So anything that has soft plastic, anything that's impregnated with salt or scent, if it is not hard metal or wood, more than likely you're going to be, breaking the rules. So the area right below the watch unit on the lower Illinois is one of those areas, and then the catch and release zone at Blue River. Those are also barbless areas. So that means that on these treble hooks, you do need to take usually you want to take good pliers instead of using like forceps, because you're not going to get as much torque with these. So getting a good pair of pliers and pinching those barbs down. So anytime you got to pinch a barb, you just flip that hook over and you get situated on that hook point, and then you want to crimp it down as hard as you can and kind of twist that. You'll see where the point is at, and you want to bend that back towards the hook itself, and you want to cover that up. If you fish the mountain fork is all barbless hooks, so they don't have the bait restriction anymore, but you do have to barb or debarb all your hooks when you're down there. So, but just something to keep in mind, because I wouldn't think that this is this is to me artificial. This is what I use to bass fish and stream fish with. So it's a soft plastic. There's nothing real about it. I don't consider it, bait. But according to the regulations, this is considered bait if you're in those two areas. So something to keep in mind if you do go to one of those areas. Always better to just stick with hard metal and synthetic anytime you see the catch and release or the restricted trout areas. But make sure that you crimp and barb down those barbs and get rid of them. You can also buy it's not as advantageous with like rooster tails because they're usually fixed down there. But on something like a super duper that's got an actual clip here, you can buy. Now you're not going to find them at retailers, but you can order online or through catalogs barbless hooks. So if you were to buy just a barbless single hook to replace this trailer with, or a barbless treble hook to replace, you can just pull that right off of this little keychain clip and then replace it. And that's, that way for sure you're within the rules, and you don't have to worry about crimping down and ruining a hook that has a barb when you're going to use it somewhere else. But that's something to think about. So we got about 10 minutes left. If anybody's got any questions on anything, what size rooster tail is your go-to? 1/16 ounce for anything trout is always going to be my size that I'm going to go with, if I can. Um, the these 1/8 ounce lures right here, they're going to be fine. I don't like to burn them as fast. So if I'm fishing Lower Mountain Fork or Blue River, especially if I'm fishing still water, I want to allow that bait to fall, and I want to be able to have kind of a slow, steady retrieve, as opposed to feel like I'm reeling faster than I want to either keep it off the bottom or keep it out of trouble. So a 1/16 ounce size profile, um, something like this, which is a 1/16 ounce versus its 1/8 counterpart, there's really not much of a difference. But you can feel that, just the heaviness of them. The 1/8 is, you'll know it when you cast it. The one thing being, though, is that if you don't have the appropriate rod and reel setup, which is going to be a medium light or a light action rod with 4 pound test, maybe 6 pound test, but probably 2 or 4. More than likely, you start trying to, especially if you're using spinning equipment, if you're trying to rip those and toss them across the stream or get them to your location and cast the distance you want to get them to, you'll notice if you're using a spin casting equipment with 8 10 pound test, or if you have 8 10 pound test on your open face spinning reel, first off, it's not going to be able to throw. It's going to try to jump the line off of a spinning reel. With the spin caster, it's probably more than likely going to dive straight towards the water without getting the distance, because when you went to go let it go, it doesn't have that torque to get there. So um, an eighth of an ounce of any of these is going to be great for any setup. That's going to be your medium action, your straight out of the box combo sets. That's where your eighth of an ounce lure profiles are going to excel. The 1/16 ounce, you start to get into that range of really needing more than, I mean, now you can do it if you're inexperienced, you've been casting spinning reels your entire life. You can put 6 pound test on a medium action rod and throw a 1/16 ounce or a 1/32 ounce without having the line jump. But there is no margin for error when you load that rod tip up and you go to whip um, through to let go. Your fingers got to come off that line at the right time, as you got enough torque. That also comes down to how much line are you leading um, off the end of your rod tip. So when you go to cast something and you reel that lure up, you want that lure probably hanging to about right here. If you reel that eye guide all the way up to the tip right here and go to try to cast it, one, it's not going to throw well. Two, you're more than likely looking at a tangle immediately following it. So, but 1/16 ounce, 1/8 ounce, those are going to be kind of and that's really kind of standard with what these lure sizes are made of anyways. But you want to start throwing the 1/16 ounce and below. You really want to look to be using a light action rod or a medium light action rod. 4 pound test to be safe. You probably get away with 6, but 4 pound test more than likely. Same thing goes for the size of the rod. A 5 footer versus a 7.5 foot rod. Because they make all these rods for different uses, but sometimes when you're in those tight spaces on like a Blue River, it makes more sense to go to Blue River with like a 4'6" kind of micro rod, like a light action short rod, so you can fish those braids and throw lighter line, smaller baits, pick up more fish, more bites. Whereas if you're at the Illinois River, where you got a big, wide, open floodplain, especially when the water is not generating, you can throw a 6'6", 7'6" rod with an 8 ounce lure, or even a 16th ounce lure, and you have all that room to be able to load up the rod tips to throw them. So it kind of becomes situational sometimes, but typically for any lure fishing for trout, you want to be sticking light action, medium light action rod. Not to say you can't do it with the medium action, but if you're going to be using a spinning reel with heavier than 6 pound test and a medium rod, if you throw anything lighter than an eighth of an ounce, more than likely you're going to experience line jump, which is going to lead to twists in the spool or bird's nests that come off. Same thing goes for spin casting equipment. You're not going to get the tangles because the line can't jump, but you're going to notice that you don't have casting efficiency where you're just throwing the lure straight down into the water because you can't get enough rod tip torque to be able to actually fling that light lure. But you throw an 8 ounce lure on, just that eighth of an ounce, that 1/16th of an ounce up, what the difference that it makes in having the ability for the rod to be able to throw that lure efficiently. But that's kind of the main takeaways from artificial lure in Oklahoma. Tie directly onto your line, stick to a basic green or brown inline spinner or some type of gold plated spoon, slab, super duper. All of the baits except for the super dupers are going to be labeled by ounce. So it's easy to see 1/6 of or quarter of an ounce, 1/6 of an ounce, 1/8 of an ounce, 1/16th of an ounce, 1/10 of an ounce for some of them, 1/24th of an ounce, 1/20th. Sometimes you'll see 1/32nd. But with the super dupers, they're labeled by number. So 500 is your smallest, which is going to be the equivalent of like a 1/32nd ounce. And then 501, 502, 503. And that 503 is going to be more like your 1/6 ounce rooster tail. You can catch fish on it. It's going to work probably a little bit better in lakes because you have a little bit more room. You're not dealing with current. But with super dupers, that 501 is your 1/16th ounce. That 502 is kind of your 1/8 ounce. Those are the size profiles that you're looking at. But keeping your metals in some shade of gold, you're going to find success. Straight, steady retrieves. Remembering when you're in the river, if you have current, casting, cross current 45 degrees upstream, steady retrieve in. If you're going to use an inline spinner, whether you're in still water or current water, a nice little rod flick, like a rod set flick, when it hits the water, just to get that blade spinning, tie in your line directly onto all of them. And then if you want to try some nymphing, when you're at like a Blue River or a Mountain Fork or a Lower Illinois, trying out some type of trout magnet, something like this, or a tube, and floating it below some type of small bobber. Like I said, you can get these fly fishing floats, strike indicator, bobber, however you like to call it. You're going to find those at any fly shop or Bass Pro or a Cabela's, maybe even in academies or in Atwoods, just depending on what the selection that they may have. Those are going to do the least amount of damage to your line. You can move them up and down, which is usually necessary on our rivers because our trout areas are less than 7 miles. So that's not a lot of river. You're going to be changing depths constantly. You don't have a big river that has where you're fishing at 6 feet for most of the day. You could go from the one hole where I need to get down to 4 feet, and then you go into a smaller tail out or maybe a run section where it's like, I only need to be 18 inches down, if that. So being able to move that bobber up and down your line without it chewing on it too bad, like it would if you were using any type of bobber that has a clip, whether it be a stick bobber or a round bobber, anything that's got the little crimps on them, that's immediately going to damage your line. So if you do have, it's fine when it's sitting there, but the second you have to either take it off or move it up or down, you're going to need to cut your line because you've compromised the integrity of the line so bad that all it's going to take is a big fish or the wrong tree branch or rock, and you're going to lose all of the tackle that you have tied on to the end of your line. So most people don't think of nymph fishing with non-fly fishing equipment, but it's super effective, especially in our smaller bodies of water that we have. And just, little things, little soft plastics that they sell. Um, they have little mouse tails, or your trout worms, or your trout magnets. I have the most confidence in these trout magnets. They're little inch worms. This is like just the perfect size, green, chartreuse, red. If it's just a bad day, or I'm looking to just switch it up a little bit, maybe throw those on my 3-weight or throw them on my spinning gear. Um, I usually will always I'll double them up like this on a leader line. So I'll put them into the box so they're already ready to go. So I can just tie on, and I'm already doubled up, ready to float. But you can attach them in any which way you want. If you need to get down to deeper depth, going from the 1/200th ounce jig head to like a 1/64th ounce jig head, maybe using one of the bigger size profile trout magnets. I like the smallest ones, but they make this one. This is about the same size as your standard 1.5 inch tube. It's just a little shade smaller. So, but that's what you're looking at. Your bait profiles, inch and a half, 1/8 and under, and then you can kind of get creative with the soft plastics, how you want to fish them. But all of your hard baits, they're going to fish identical: straight, slow, steady retrieve, cross current, 45 degrees up river, still water, fan cast. Make as many casts as you can. Try to get as many bites as you can. But with that, we've reached the hour. So if there's no more questions, at the top of the chat is a link to our trout angler guide, which gives a more in-depth breakdown of some of our properties, as far as some of the things you may need if you want to go somewhere new, where to camp, bait and tackle stores close by, some other information that's helpful if you're going to a new area. So that's up at the top of the link. If you received this course through email, you have all my contact information. If you don't, you can go to wildlifedepartment.com, go to our fishing resources page. My contact information is at the bottom. Call, text, email me. Any fishing questions, anything, trout, non-trout. The goal of these courses is to, provide information to where ultimately you as the angler are going to find out what you like to do, what you like to fish for, how you like to catch them, what equipment you like to use. The great thing about hunting and fishing and outdoor sports is there is no one size fits all right way to do anything. You can find success in so many different ways. Here for trout, what I showed today, this is the easiest, quickest way to get you on fish, build confidence. You may fall in love with the super duper. You may fall in love with an inline spinner. You may fall in love with nymphing below a bobber with, soft plastics, or you may go down the rabbit hole on YouTube or journals or whatever and learn other ways to trout fish, with lures or with flies or with bait. The one thing is just knowing that, we just want you to have success. It's no fun to go out fishing and not find success. It's a sport that is a confidence builder, and you can't always make them bite. There are days where it's just, for whatever reason, there's factors that can really limit your ability to have what you may consider success. But going out and catching a limited trout at any of our seasonal areas or even our year-round areas is something that everybody has the ability to do. And we want you to be able to do that. So anytime you have any questions, feel free to just reach out to me, and we'll get you straight in the right direction. And hopefully you can have some success. Stay safe out there. Have some great holidays. And if you ever need anything, let us know. We'll have a couple more of these tomorrow. We're doing lake and pond tips as well as fly fishing tips. And then on Thursday, we are doing one course for Lower Illinois, one course for Blue River, and one course for the Lower Mountain Fork. Registration is still open on those courses. But either way, if you can't get registered, you can just come back to our website, 10 a.m., 1 a.m., or 3 p.m. next couple of days, and just click on the live link, and we'll have some trout classes going. So thanks, everybody, for showing. Like I said, if you have any information or have any questions, reach out. We'll get you settled. Otherwise, we will See you at the next one, and good luck trout fishing out there.